Dragon Puppy by Stephen Lake. Rogue and his team walked casually into a local village and soon spotted the old and clearly nervous village chief who had summoned them earlier. Upon sighting Rogue's team, the chief ran over to them in excitement. "Oh, thank the ancients, you're here. You've arrived just in time," shouted the chief. Rogue nodded. "The guild master said you had an issue with a dragon?" he asked. The chief's eyes grew wide with terror. "Oh, absolutely. And the worst kind, even," he replied. "What kind is it?" However, before the chief could say anything, a loud, terrifying roar echoed from above them. Immediately, everyone's eyes went to the sky, where they soon spotted a massive, blood-red dragon flying towards them from just above the trees. "Oh, that's a biggins," said Boyari. "Yes, it is," replied Rogue flatly. The dragon, as it approached the village, began to breath large, powerful, and intimidating red flames of fire. Rogue's team quickly readied themselves, complete with anti-fire spells, buffs, and other things as they waited for the dragon's attack. However, Rogue didn't move. As he stood there, unshakable like a mountain, the village chief and all the other villagers quickly scattered in every direction as they hurried to find cover. The dragon continued to move closer and closer to Rogue and his team as its anger raged like 1,000 infernos. Despite having Rogue with them, the dragon was quickly unnerving his team. Eventually the dragon stopped just above them and glared down at Rogue's team with bitter antipathy. Rogue, are you planning on doing something?" asked Kite anxiously. "Yes," replied Rogue flatly. "That's good. But when?" "Soon." "Great. But exactly how soon?" asked Kite anxiously. "Soon." Kite sighed in frustration at this. "Great. We're all gonna die," he muttered. However, despite the growing fear of everyone around him, Rogue remained steadfast, unmovable, and unafraid. Finally, deciding that it was now or never, Rogue's team stepped forward to begin their attack, but then stopped when Rogue held up his hand. "Wait," he said. The others paused and looked at him, not sure what he was doing. "I hope you have a plan," said Boyari. "I do," replied Rogue. He then casually lifted a hand, pointed it at the dragon, and cast a tame spell. To everyone's shock and surprise, the dragon immediately froze mid-roar as though someone had pressed the pause button on time. His team looked at Rogue in abject befuddlement. What just happened?" asked Boyari. But Rogue said nothing. Moments later, the once terrifying, powerful, gigantic dragon began to shrink, and did so rapidly, until it transformed from a massive, terrifying, bloodthirsty monster into a small creature not much larger than a Great Dane. It then sat down at Rogue's feet, its tongue lolling out of its mouth as it panted happily like a little puppy that had just been given a rubber chew toy. Rogue's team looked on at this in confusion and perplexity as they tried to make sense of what had just happened, if that was even possible. "What the? Did you just?" said Kite in surprise. "No way. Rogue just tamed a freaking dragon," said Boyari in wonder. Sarah laughed at this as she lowered her wand. "Oh, of course he did. This is Rogue we're talking about," she laughed nervously. The little dragon then stood up, trotted over to Rogue, and began nuzzling his hand as he kindly petted it in return. Sarah, seeing that all was safe, walked over to the little dragon and happily began scratching it behind the ears, which the dragon accepted with gratitude, its leg and tail wagging around in the greatest expression of joy possible. As the team stood in front of the little dragon, petting and scratching its head, the citizens of the village, upon hearing the strange, non-menacing sounds outside their houses, began to slowly emerge and were surprised at what they saw. As they carefully approached the newly tamed and miniaturized dragon, they looked to Rogue's team for assurances that they were safe. Sarah, upon seeing this, motioned for them to approach, which they cautiously did, while keeping a close eye on the little dragon. "So has it been properly dealt with?" asked the village chief nervously. "Yeah, Rogue cast tame on it, so it's as gentle as bunny now," said Sarah. "Yeah, given that there's a bunch of bloodthirsty horned bunnies around here, that may not be the best way to describe it," said Boyari with a grin. "Well, let's just say he's as gentle as real-world bunnies," replied Sarah with a grin. "So what should we do with the little guy?" asked Kite. Just then a little boy came bounding out of the group of villagers, much to his mother's horror, and raced over to the little dragon, calling out happily to it as he did. He then wrapped his arms around the little dragon's neck and hugged it. The little dragon smiled at this and began licking the boy's face excitedly. "Mama, look, I've got my own pet dragon," shouted the little boy excitedly. However, upon seeing this, the mother rushed over, grabbed the little boy, and quickly pulled him away, much to his disappointment. "Now, dear, it's not safe to be around dragons," she protested. But the boy cried all the more. "Mama, I want my dragon," he cried. But the mom wouldn't relent. However, just as she was about to drag him away, Sarah approached them holding the little dragon, who had somehow now shrunken even smaller, making it not much bigger than a large iguana. Rogue already cast a taming spell on him and even shrank him to a manageable size. So he's not a threat anymore. "So if you still want to, you can keep him," she said. "But they breathe fire and eat people," protested the mother. Sarah laughed. "This one can't anymore. He's too small," she replied. She then looked at the little dragon in her arms and cradled it like an infant baby. The little boy's eyes grew wider in excitement as he reached out for the now tiny dragon. Squirming his way out of his mother's arms, he soon raced over and took the little dragon from Sarah and held it kindly, but excitedly in his arms. He then looked up at his mom with deep, pleading eyes. The mother looked at her little boy and his new pet dragon, and then at Sarah, who shrugged. Eventually, the mother sighed. "All right, you can keep him," she eventually replied. The little boy cheered with joy at this, and then ran off with his new pet dragon to show all of his friends and family in the village. Seeing that their job was done, Rogue and his team soon turned and made their way out of the village and back towards the guild. As they did, Boyari turned to Rogue in wonder and said, "Dude, what you just did back there was so epically cool. One of these days you need to teach me how you did that." "The taming spell?" asked Rogue curiously. "Yeah, man. Teach it to me." Rogue smiled. "Sure, I'd be glad to." Sarah laughed at this. "Just be sure you don't get carried away with it, or you're going to make this game boring." "Oh, burn," laughed Kite. Boyari smirked at him incredulously. "Oh, yeah, right. Like you're any better with your stupid coffee spell." Everyone laughed at this. "Well, I admit, he does get carried away with that. But at least he doesn't turn entire mountain valleys into breakfast buffets like Rogue has," chided Sarah. Rogue, however, merely furrowed a brow at this. "I didn't see you complaining when you were gorging yourself on that mountain of bacon," he replied flatly. Boyari laughed. "The only reason I did that was because if I'd waited, Bomer would have eaten it all." Rogue laughed at this. "Point taken. So, who's up for another mission?" he said. "Does it involve dragons?" asked Kite. Rogue grinned. "Only if we wanted to." The end.